Hello, everyone. It's Shane Conto, your Wasteland reviewer, and welcome to the Wasteland Watchlist here on the SPDM Crew Podcasting Network. And this is my weekly show where a guest and I play some movie roulette and randomly select a movie from a obscenely large watch list, and it could be basically anything. And this time we actually landed on what I feel like is like relatively known classic piece of cinema from the late 60s. Goodbye, Mr. Chips. But joining me is Bubbawheat. Thank you so much for coming back on.
Of course, it's always a pleasure.
Absolutely. And we're now regular collaborators on this show, and we've explored some pretty great films. A lot of films, honestly, from like this era seem to keep circling around anytime I do my random selection. But this particular film, to give a little bit of background, so was released November 5th, 1969, does clock in at 155 minutes, had a budget of about £2.5 million. Didn't really see box office numbers from my extremely reliable source of Wikipedia. This is based on Goodbye, Mr. Chips from 1934 by James Hilton. And roots started at MGM back in 1951. Originally had Vicente Minnelli actually attached to direct the film, starring Julie Andrews and Rex Harrison, which honestly, not surprising for that particular era in terms of a musical. Richard Burton was actually set to star, but stepped down to avoid starring with a pop star he was not particularly happy about, his co-star, who was cast in the film. And this was actually nominated for Best Actor and Best Score, which this has become part of a long line of films that Peter O'Toole was nominated for Best Actor for that he never won. So there's a lot of actors where it's like, I remember it was like that whole thing giving been too long give Leo his Oscar. Well, go tell that to like Peter O'Toole, who acted for like decades and decades and decades, had 8 nominations and never actually won a competitive Oscar. I'm pretty sure they gave him a lifetime achievement at some point. This is
Justice for
indeed
Supergirl.
Justice for Supergirl. So this is from director Herbert Ross, starring Peter O'Toole and Petula Clark. And you have Michael Redgrave thrown in there as well. This musical version of James Hilton's novel concerns shy, withdrawn English schoolteacher Arthur Chipping, who falls for flashy showgirl Catherine Bridges while teaching at Brookfield Boys' School outside London in the 1920s. But wait, what are your general thoughts on this sprawling musical classic?
Yeah, I didn't know what to expect from this. I'd heard the name before of the movie, and I'm not sure which one is more popular. So, and did have to check with you because you just said
Yes.
we're watching Goodbye, Mr. Chips, and then the first one that
Realizing
comes up
that, yeah,
is the 30s version. And then you're like, no, it's the 1969 version. And then I looked at that. Oh, that's 2.5 hours long.
I will have
Uh,
to clarify next time because both of them are indeed on my watch list, actually. So, as it turned out that way.
and I will say that it started especially slowly, especially like with the what the overture. That's like just a, what was it, like a 5 minute piece of music with just a
Now,
still image.
I listened a bit, got the vibes of the music, and certainly skipped over the overture and the intermission. It shaved off like a good 10, 15 minutes of the movie.
Yeah, I think I was just like setting up, so I just had it playing
Yeah.
and on while I was like doing stuff, around the bedroom, before settling in to watch it. And I did have to watch it in two parts because I kind of
That is
I'm a
fair.
procrastinator, so I watched like an hour of it late last night, and then I finished the rest after I got home from work today. Just in just in time,
There you go.
finishing about a half an hour before we started recording. And it's even after the overture, I think I had a bit of a slow start,
Hmm.
but and I didn't care for the musical numbers. I kind of tuned out during those.
Well,
But the story did eventually draw me in, and
mhm,
I did get, emotional at the ending. It was kind of surprising, and my wife was the same way too, because she was kind of in and out a little bit, last
mhm.
night and then today. But then I think she fairly solidly watched the last hour of it, and she was invested at that point.
Well, and that's definitely the thing about this particular film is this is far from a perfect film. There's definitely some flaws here. Not excluding even the runtime, 2 hours and 35 minutes, which like I feel like every musical at that time had to be like you're contractually obligated to be like at least 2 hours and 20 minutes. Or are you really a musical? And I think that's a lot of the musicals from that era. And I think what really took me out of it from a musical standpoint was these musical like interludes, like like
The
inside the
internal
sequence.
monologues.
Yeah, it's where it's just like Peter O'Toole was not the best choice for singing these internal monologues, which are like Peter O'Toole is one of the greatest actors of all time, one of the most appreciated, just never like always the bridesmaid at the Oscars and never the bride. With all of his Oscar nominations but not winning any. He's an extremely talented actor and he does a great job in the acting in this movie, I think. I just all those times I'm like, just cut those inner monologues out because like they're not really doing much adding to this movie, spelling things out, and then also, he's not the strongest singer, but it does make sense that Richard Burton was originally going to do this because I'm pretty sure like he started like Camelot and stuff like that on Broadway and stuff like that. But and also we'll go even just thinking Rex Harrison was really going to be in this and his like I just talk very fast and it sounds like I'm singing. My from My Fair Lady and Dr. Dolittle would have been probably even worse. But I think Peter O'Toole does a great job anchoring this film. But I think Petula Clark, when like she sings, she's actually like putting on a show, which I think fits those parts. And
And I
obviously,
will say that my one of my favorite parts was, right after they get married and Catherine comes in to the assembly and they start singing the school song and then she starts belting out and like everyone stops and then there's a little
yes.
bit of competition with her and the headmaster's wife and like that whole scene I think was probably my favorite scene of the movie. It was really funny.
That was honestly one of the most memorable parts of the whole movie. It had so much personality and fun to it,
Mhm.
which like Peter O'Toole, I think fits perfectly in this very British, very stiff upper lip kind of like we care about uh you know law and we care about order and refinement in the classroom, and he obviously plays his intellectual very well, and he's that
Mhm.
kind of teacher who's like not going to give his students even an inch to be able
Yeah,
to
especially, I mean,
do
like it,
anything.
it kicks off, right near the beginning where he doesn't allow this his student to leave, or I don't even think it was he was leaving early. I got the impression that the student needed to leave right as soon as the class let out in order to get to this tennis tournament. That it was
Yeah.
like the championship, and he, as a teacher, made them all stay a half hour late. It just just kind of out of spite.
Well, it's like this class ends when I say it ends, not when the bell rings. And I'm like, I know people at the college that I work with who have that perspective on things. And I know some students who have that perspective, like, we get to this point, you're ending. It doesn't matter what you want to do. I'm like, I've seen this vibe, this push and pull before. I try not to be the person that keeps people after. I just like to respect that, like, yes, there's a couple minutes left. I try to wrap up class. Stop packing. Because that certainly happens to me a lot. But thinking about, I think obviously the heart and soul of this film is this dynamic between um Kippy and Catherine, and they're this odd couple kind of
Hmm.
dynamic, and it's charming. Um, could this movie have gotten along quicker and gotten to places probably a little bit uh leaner in terms narratively? Sure. But it also has some interesting perspectives on classism because there's a lot of like Catherine doesn't fit in to this space, and there's definitely a lot of judgment that floats over that
Hmm.
I feel like the film navigates in this very stiff upper lip, very British kind of boarding school here.
Yeah, I was also thrown off a bit because I didn't realize at first that it was like a period piece. Like
Mm,
I thought that it was, maybe not set in 69, but I, I got the impression, it felt very British. And
yes.
sometimes British culture, it's like it's tough to tell exactly what time period it takes place
Mm,
in. And even with like, and I think my first clue was just the old car. And
mm,
that was like, huh, that's older than I expected it to be. And then it wasn't until the World War II stuff kicked in where I was like, oh, that's when this
that's
takes.
why.
This makes a lot more sense now, especially in terms of, the gender politics as well, because
Yes.
as soon as they get married, she basically quits her job as an actress and becomes a housewife, and that
Hmm.
that was kind of surprising, watching it with a modern eye. I also think that it struggled to convey the passing of time very well because there was several moments in the middle of the film, after they got married. It's like, how much time had just passed? Is it like, and then they have their anniversary and it's like, wait, what did I miss? Like, how much longer? Wait, is this 5 years later, 10 years later? I don't understand like exactly how, like, I understand that he's looking older, like they're adding
Hmm.
gray to his hair. I do think that the old age makeup was done fairly well. I mean,
Yeah.
they kept it subtle, and I think that works, especially for this type of movie. And yeah, I liked all that. I loved their, like you said, like the odd couple interplay
Hmm.
between the two of them. Like their dating scenes at the beginning is like another favorite
Hmm.
of mine, where he's trying to be so polite and British, and he's completely insulting her play, like accidentally, just because he's getting everything wrong. And
Hmm.
she's just, charmed by it. And I just love that so much. And I also think it's kind of a fascinating look. I think you can kind of see Mr. Chipping as a person that has imposter syndrome.
Hmm.
Because I get the impression that throughout his career, he started out as an unliked teacher, and I believe that that was true at the beginning of the movie. But I think that he ended his tenure still thinking that he was an unliked teacher, and at the end of his career, he was actually a beloved teacher
Hmm.
in an institution of that school. And I don't think he as a character understood that. I think he still thought of himself as what, ditchy.
Mm. Well, and I think that's very interesting throughout the film because it isn't even just like an internal struggle for him to accept that he has these roadblocks to get lined up in front of him throughout his professional career. Because, like, what's his end game? He wants to be the headmaster of this place. And there's multiple opportunities for that to happen. And the door kind of gets like slammed in his face a bit where it's just like, when's my time? This was something promised to me. Or like, well, don't you worry, they won't be in this job very long, and then you'll slip in. It's just like anybody who's been at a job and promised a promotion or a raise and just being that goalpost being pushed further and further back on you was very relatable. And I feel like that there are certain elements of this film that feel a little distant because it is very like refined, very British, very period piece. But then there's those little elements that do speak to you. And I think that was one that certainly made him so much more relatable, is that like he is trying to achieve something. And a lot of people have been in those situations where something that they earned that was also promised is not paid off. And they keep going and going and going. And I think that's what makes the latter parts of this film so compelling is he loses and so much is taken from him at that
Mhm.
point, including pretty big emotional moment towards the end of the film that I thought the presentation of this moment of loss came in a very interesting way that they delivered the information and you're just like, "Oh, wait a minute. Like that's heavy. That's
Mhm.
pretty impactful." And it felt very satisfying with the catharsis that the film gives you when he finally like reaches this pinnacle of his career that he's reaching for. And
It almost felt like a Joss Whedon-esque of anytime that Joss Whedon's characters
mm,
are too happy, the other shoe's gonna drop right after that. So
it's
it's
like,
like
look
in
out
this
for me.
one, yeah, in this one he finally gets his promise of being headmaster only because the other headmaster is leaving, and he's kind of
Mm,
like the last option because it's still in the middle of the war.
yeah.
And then as soon as he gets it hasn't even really been finalized yet, but then his wife dies in a bombing raid. And it's interesting because I was watching it, and I wasn't really kind of in the headspace of kind of thinking about what was going to happen, but my wife definitely called it. She heard the bombing like off screen, and it's like, oh, I bet that hit his wife. And then two
And it
minutes
did.
later, yeah, he gets the news. And again, I do love that moment, that juxtaposition of his students just wanting to play a gag on him, because
Mm,
he just gotten promoted to headmaster and they thought it would be funny, and then they find out that's the news as well, and then they realize, oh, this is not the best time for a joke. And then he just
no.
kind of soldiers on and continues with the rest of his lesson, because that is exactly what that character would do, because like his life begins and ends with the school. I mean, he lives
Mm,
at the school.
yeah.
The only time we ever see him outside of the school is whenever he, took the winter vacation to Pompeii, and
Hmm.
the one time where he goes to the party. But
Hmm.
and all the rest of it, it's all just him inside the school.
One, it's also a very British thing. It's like, we shall soldier on. And it's like, we're not going to confront our feelings in this moment. But you do have that moment where like it's that great close up of him, and like I have a little image of it on IMDb where it's just like you could feel the emotion there. And that's the because like this isn't a particularly big performance for Peter O'Toole
Mhm.
because his character is very reserved and refined, but he has his moments, and it's the underlying emotion of what he's presenting here that's so effective. And to your point, like they do keep the aging very subtle, his hair slowly just getting more salt and peppery as it's going throughout the film. Also, I appreciate the uh that mustache mustache hair and like cap combo that he has. It's like a very like specific look, and I think it really works well. And I think there's a lot of subtlety in terms of like all of his clothes are very like brown and grays and stuff like this. And Catherine is vibrant colors. And obviously, like it's pretty obvious that they're different, but it's those little
Mhm.
details that I think really
Yeah, the one kind
reinforce
of song
against.
montage that I did enjoy, at least visually, is whenever they were singing about the flowers, or he was talking about the flowers, and
Mhm.
each flower that he mentioned, she would be wearing a dress of the same color of the
Yeah.
flower. And I thought that was like a nice visual moment that within the movie. And it's like one other scene that I think was another fun scene was whenever Chipping confronted the financier. um
Mhm.
he stood up to him, and then like right after that, his wife brought in Ursula, the famous actress who also, I guess, is an ex-girlfriend of the financier. So she kind
Mhm.
of, beat him at his own game, but at the same time she did it behind the scenes. So he thought that it was his confrontation that won him over. He had no idea that it was actually his wife that succeeded for him.
Which I did like that character in particular,
Hmm.
Ursula Mossbank. Um, I don't know Welsh very well, so I know I'm gonna say her name wrong, but it's looked like some form of like Sean Phillips, Sian, because I know her because I took Latin for 5 years, and we watched the whole entire mini series of I Claudius over the course of one academic year every Friday. And she played Livia, one of the main characters in that. And she's also Cassiopeia in Clash of the Titans. And she's in the original Dune. So like I've seen her pop up in quite a few things. And I thought she brought fun energy to it for sure. And like Michael Redgrave, who obviously is part of quite the um illustrious acting family, popping up as like the headmaster. I thought he did a fine job. So there's some good like supporting pieces here, but really at the end of the day, this is a big sprawling 2.5 hour musical that's really about Peter O'Toole and Petula Clark for sure. And obviously at the end of the day, it's really about Mr. Chips, obviously,
Hmm.
Chippy, Arthur Chipping. And sure, this film's pretty sentimental. It's one of those types of things where it's just like, yeah, it's gonna schmooze you. That's what it's doing. Like, you
Even
know
though
it's there
I
to
had a
schmooze
hard
you.
time, I had a hard time separating whenever he was given his big speech and like, his big grand idea. And he's like, I keep getting older, but these students, they stay the same age. And of course, I think you know exactly where I'm going. I'm
All
like,
right, all right, all
my
right.
exactly.
Wait a minute, this isn't Dazed and Confused. Uh, what pop culture will do. You can't unhear certain things anymore. But and maybe I felt a little sentimental because like I'm getting up on 10 years working at the college that I work, and I've been there long enough to see multiple cycles of students go through. And like I'm having a bunch of my former students, they're getting engaged and all of these things, and some of their younger siblings. I'm gonna freak the hell out the first time I have one of their kids show up, and I'm like, oh no. Just like I've been here too long. But like that kind of journey, like obviously I value education so much. I am certainly not a Mr. Chipping when it comes to my approach in the classroom and stuff like that. But it does have that kind, like I appreciate that connection and impact and that value of what somebody can do in the classroom to inspire young people. And I could appreciate that. This film could have been leaner. It didn't need some of the musical numbers, especially anytime Peter O'Toole tried to sing.
Yeah,
Was not
and on top of that,
necessary.
like, two of the musical numbers were just there. It felt like just padding. Like, I mean, it made sense that whenever he went to see her, her act
Yeah.
at the beginning, but it's like, yeah, and if this was a normal movie, they would just, that would be a 2-minute scene and not a
Mhm.
5-minute musical number. And then also like towards the end, whenever she, jumped in as like the musical director at the school, and she was putting on a song and dance with the kids. It's like, yeah, we didn't need to see that entire song.
We can't legally tell you to lose weight. We just need you to get tighter. That's what I would have told this movie. It's like you just need to be tighter. And in general, I enjoyed myself watching this film. Like, I'm not gonna say like I absolutely adored or loved this movie, but I have a lot of respect for Peter O'Toole, especially. Like, this is D.E. Lawrence. This is Lawrence of Arabia. This is Anton Ego. Big sprawling range of performances there. But like I think he really came to play, and I really enjoyed Petula Clark in this and energy that she brought to the film because it
Mm.
needed a little bit of that energy because otherwise this would have been a very like very refined, very methodical British 2 hours and 35 minutes that it could have used a little bit of a nudge at points. But
Yeah, I also, my wife and I thought it was, very funny that the relationship was very British, especially after they got married. It's like they showed like zero emotion towards each other. They would go in for a kiss, but they would just like, I was joking with her. It's like, oops, I missed.
But I guess, do you have anything else any other notes or anything you wanted to add?
I don't think so. I enjoyed the ending. It was very sentimental. I think that it made the right choice not to end with his death, which,
Hmm.
my wife kind of thought that that's where the movie was going. I did not. I thought, and I think that that was the right decision. And I also thought it was interesting to have the end scene with the student, which was like the grandson of the tennis boy. And I didn't check, and I split it over 2 days, so I couldn't remember. I
Yeah,
wouldn't be surprised if they used the same actor in both roles.
that's a good
But
point.
I couldn't tell you for sure because there was such a long gap, and
That is very
they
fair.
were wearing something different. But I it seems like that would be something that a movie would do, and I think it would work. And he talks about his great grandfather as well. And this
Mhm.
is probably 90-year-old Mr. Chipping at that
Mhm.
point in the movie. And I thought that was like a nice note to end on.
I think that scene captures the impact and legacy. And no, we did not need to watch this old man die. So there we go. But this is a fine film, and if you do enjoy some of those old classic period musicals, this certainly scratches that itch for sure. I'll be
Yeah,
interested when I
I think my
eventually.
wife put it perfectly. She said, I'm glad that I watched it, but we're never going to watch that again.
Probably not. I feel like I would only watch it if like others maybe watch it for a podcast or something like that. But at the end of the day, I'd be interested to see what the 30s version of this film was like for sure. Probably shorter. I can imagine it was pretty shorter than this. But that was the era. They were big, they were sprawling, they were 2.5 to 3 hour musicals. That's what Hollywood was making. But we thank you so much for coming on and chatting some movies with me.
Absolutely.
And thank all of you out there for listening. Make sure to like, comment, and share on this episode. Let me know what your favorite musical from that era, that like golden age era of musical films. And make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. The SPDM Crew Podcasting Network is ever expanding. We have so many shows with all different types of themes and ideas and something for everybody. And if you want to become part of the crew by being a guest on a show like this one, Wasteland Watchlist, or by starting your own podcast, make sure to reach out to us on our website. And if you like our logo, check out HiFlyer Creative for all your digital marketing needs. But most importantly, thank you as always for tuning in and supporting the Wasteland Watchlist here on the SPDM Crew Podcasting Network.